Hi, I'm Christopher Landon, and welcome to the Sarah O'Connell Show.
Welcome to the Sarah O'Connell Show.
Christopher Landon, welcome to the Sarah O'Connell Show. How are you today?
I'm pretty good. How are you?
Very good. Thanks. Delighted to have you on my show. I want to go all the way back to before the beginning of your career, actually. Is filmmaking what you always aspired to do growing up? I know you studied screenwriting at university.
Yeah, I always wanted to be a filmmaker. I was one of those weird kids who ran around in high school making short films and, torturing my friends and forcing them to act and die in them. I recall we made an unofficial horror movie sequel to Xanadu, which, I should actually go and try and dig that up somehow and embarrass myself.
I'd watch that.
Yeah, right? That sounds pretty cool, right?
Yeah.
Like bloody Xanadu. Come on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was something that I always wanted to do and pursued it, doggedly as soon as I graduated high school.
Because your dad is the legendary Michael Landon, who I got to know because my mum was a huge fan of Little House on the Prairie, and then when I was a young kid, you saw it's like Highway to Heaven and stuff growing up. So you sort of just around that kind of environment as well.
Yeah, I mean, I was around it a lot. We would visit my dad on set quite a bit. But it's funny, he was much more influential to me, I think, off set and off camera, because I think the whole reason I really fell in love with horror in particular was because my dad was a big fan of the genre.
Really?
Yeah, and so he and I would watch horror movies every weekend together. And that was just a very kind of special time with him. And so it's really interesting to me. I mean, he got his start in horror. One of the first movies he ever started was I Was a Teenage Werewolf.
Right.
And so, yeah, it's just funny that, I have an older brother who followed a path much more similar to my dad's in terms of doing programming and stuff that's much more family oriented. And I sort of took the darker path and went, full horror.
See, I'd still watch that with the entire family, though. I grew up in the 1980s, so I remember my dad coming home with a load of videos of Terminator and Enter the Dragon. I was about 5, I think, but it was the 80s.
Yeah, I miss video stores. I talk about that a lot.
They're the best. But I kind of have a similar thing now with Netflix in that, I'll go to Netflix, spend 2 hours browsing, can't decide what I want, and then just leave again.
Yeah.
So in 1998, you co-wrote Another Day in Paradise. Can you tell me how you got that opportunity coming out of university?
So I was actually still in university. I was still going to college at the time. And I had made, I had written and co-directed a short film with a friend of mine in college. And we had a screening. We organized a screening and just invited heaps of people that we didn't know. And there was a producer there, and they asked if I had a writing sample, and gave it to them. And then they gave it to Larry Clark, who was the director at the time. And he had just done Kids. So it was a pretty big deal. And I got the gig, and I was shocked that I got it. And I wrote the film. And I was probably, when I actually wrote the film, I think I was 19. And it was crazy because it was surreal, and I didn't think that it was actually going to get made. And then all of a sudden it was happening. And then the next thing I knew, I had people trying to hire me for other work. And of course that went up in flames. As we know, I was too young for that kind of, I think I was too young for that kind of early success, and overwhelming. So it was an interesting path, but I'm glad that I was actually, it was a great opportunity, and I learned a lot from it. And it was really cool. I got to work with Larry Clark, who's an unbelievable artist.
A great experience too, I'm sure. And the movie behind you, so Disturbia 2007 is such a huge film when that came out. Can you tell me a bit about the inspiration for that film? Did you have interesting neighbors?
I always had interesting neighbors, and I'm also, by nature, a voyeur. I think any filmmaker is. But the inspiration for that film, I was struck by the idea. I was in my car I live in LA, so we have a lot of time in our cars. But I was in my car and I was listening to NPR, and there was a story on at the time about Martha Stewart, and when she was on house arrest. And that's kind of what sort of got my mind going. And I thought, what would I do, on house arrest? And then I sort of, this idea happened that was sort of Hitchcock meets John Hughes. And I just wrote it. I wrote it as a spec, and then sold it. It was actually my first spec sale. And I don't know if people in here watching this know what a spec is, but it's when you write a screenplay without being hired. You just do it for the hell of it, to try and sell it later.
Yeah, and it was such a great film, and it still stands up today. I watched it a few weeks ago as it happened, independently of this interview. I just revisited it, and it's still a lot of fun.
Yeah, it is a good movie. I'm proud of that.
And then, so you also worked on Dirty Sexy Money. Can you tell me the challenges of writing for television versus feature films?
Well, that was a really interesting experience for me. I was invited to write on the show by my good friend Greg Berlanti, who is a producer on the show, and Greg and I have known each other for many, many years. It was amazing because I worked with so many interesting, creative people. The writers' room on that show was exceptional. There were so many talented writers, and really wonderful people. But yeah, it was very different. I think feature writing, it's tends to be a lot slower, process wise. And also, it tends to be very, it's singular and it's isolated. You know what I mean? Like you are the only writer usually on a feature, unless you get fired or you're the one replacing somebody else. But in television, it was sort of like so many people involved in the process. And part of that was amazing. And I found it so refreshing. And then another part of it, I felt kind of powerless and lost sometimes. And also it was a big network show, and I think a lot has changed even since then. But it was a really good experience. And like I said, it was nice to work with so many cool people.
So you continued writing. Your directorial debut was in 2010. Can you tell me, did you write that script with the intention of directing it as well? Or
no.
Did you?
No, and I didn't write that script with the intention of ever making it. That's even more precise. I wrote and directed this film right there in the corner, Burning Palms. And that was just, I was at a very dark place in my life when I wrote this film, and it was something that I needed to get out of my system. And it was sort of like I was in this period of generally being disgusted by everyone. So I wrote a movie about it, and I had actually intended for it to be sort of like an anthology series. And I wrote more than, I think I wrote 8 of them. And then I pared it down to these 5 stories. And it was one of those scripts that I kind of gave to friends, and people really responded to it. They really loved it. And I have one friend, named Oren Siegel, who just like knew people who had money, and he gave the script to somebody and they were like, "This is great, let's make it." And so I saw it as an opportunity to direct something, because I really had wanted to. And I kind of felt like this was my chance. I had the leverage. So I did it, and it was a really interesting experience because it's a very hit and miss film, if I'm being brutally honest. I think there are things in the movie that are really successful, that I think are really cool and that capture something. And then there are other bits and moments and things where I feel like I kind of shit the bed and lost control of it. And so it was a great experience. And by the way, it had an unbelievable cast. And that was the people I got to work with were unbelievable. I mean, Rosamund Pike, and it's just bonkers cast. So It was good. It was fun. It's
Yeah,
weird.
it's a fun film, and people should definitely look it up if you haven't seen it. And then you continue to do more writing, and so Paranormal Activity came out, and it was a huge movie. You worked on the sequel, Paranormal Activity 2. At the time,
Hmm.
there were sequels for movies, horror movies coming out all the time. My expectations were always like really low. I went into
Right.
Paranormal Activity 2, and I was so impressed. Like honestly, I thought it was really well done, how it tied in with the original film and sort of took it off in a new direction as well, and the mythology that's sort of built upon. And you worked on Paranormal Activity 3 and 4 as well. How do
Hmm.
you, with films like that, which have historically just been people walking down a corridor in complete silence and then a cat jumping out, how do you keep them fresh for that many movies?
It was hard. I think when I came on to the second film,
Mm,
they had already started shooting some of it and they were having a great deal of difficulty. And I think I stepped into that film as a fan, as a huge fan of the original film. Um, and what I kind of sussed out quickly in the process was that they were, first and foremost, they were just trying to make the film the way Oren Peli had made the first film,
right.
which was like, let's just improvise stuff. And I think that's lightning in a bottle. And I think that worked once and once only. And so I kind of stepped into the process and said, like, you guys need a script, like you need a story, we need a roadmap. And then also it was just about scares, and coming up with set pieces and things that I thought were really terrifying, and it was something that I felt really comfortable doing. Um, and then I think when I had the idea for the third film while we were making the second one, I was like, we need to go back to the 80s and tell the
Right.
story of Katie and Christy when they were young. And I was so excited by the idea of shooting VHS. I just thought it would be such a cool found footage movie. And that was when I felt like we really hit our groove as a franchise in the third movie. Um, and I also think that we kind of found the franchise's voice, which was utilizing different forms of technology to tell a specific kind of story. And so the fourth movie was obviously more about, sort of the current technology at the time, which was laptops and phones and things like that.
Yeah.
So, and then I got to direct one of them, which was the Marked Ones,
Yeah.
which was a spin-off. And that one was so fun just because I didn't have to follow any of the other rules, and I got to do something that was wildly different, but still very much part of the same franchise.
Yeah, because it was set in the same universe, but obviously it was an entirely all Latino cast. And how
Mhm.
did that film resonate with the community, by the way?
I think it resonated really well. I was really proud of it, and I was proud of the cast. And I know that we were really praised, and I don't think that people really even, I mean, it's interesting now in hindsight, but I don't think that we even got the props and the credit we deserve for, going for something that was so specific,
Mm,
and trying to be as authentic as we could possibly be. But I think it's a film that found its audience in the end. It's nice that a lot of people have told me that they really loved that film.
yeah.
And it was a great experience. And I also think it was a way to sort of prove that we could do different things within the franchise.
Can you tell me, because I've always wondered this from watching the Paranormal Activity movies, who actually shoots each shot? Is it the actor that's supposed to be shooting it, or is the cameraman filling in for that person? Because more than any other film, the camera itself is a character, right?
It's a character. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. It's funny. In certain cases, the actors would operate. In many cases, we had the DP would operate, or I would operate. On the Marked Ones, I operated quite a bit, just because I felt like I knew exactly where I wanted the camera to be. I actually got a concussion doing it once.
How did that
We had a
happen?
little mishap, but that's going to happen sometimes. But yeah, it was a mix of people behind the camera, interestingly enough.
And so another thing I've always wondered is, so these are found footage movies, right? So the idea is that the characters themselves are filming it. But then someone's obviously at some point in the future found all of this footage and edited them together, almost like horror films rather than documentaries, because they don't have a narrative over them. So
Right.
then I wonder, do these films get released in their world in the future? So at some point, other people are aware of the paranormal activity going on, or is someone finding the footage and hiding it?
We always have operated, I think, under the idea that these are not movies that have been presented to the public at large.
Right.
That they're almost, we design them as sort of to sort of prosecute. It's interesting. One of our producers, Akiva Goldsman, would always talk about how these movies needed to be designed like we were prosecuting a case, that we were trying to prove the existence of something.
Okay.
So only the most like essential pieces were put into the movie. And if you go back and watch all the films, there are no scenes that don't connect to the paranormal experience. You know what I mean? There's very little fat in them. And even when you think something on the surface is just people talking or joking around, we usually hid something in there that was still paranormal in nature. So there were so many Easter eggs tucked into all those movies.
Well, I'm going to have to revisit them.
I got to go back and watch all of them.
Keep going back.
Yeah.
And then, so I want to talk about another movie behind you, the Scout's Guide to the Zombie Apocalypse. Now, obviously, there's been a billion zombie movies over the years, but this one genuinely still felt fresh and original. And I loved how the zombies retained parts of themselves. Like they could, even just the fact that one of them could walk successfully in stilettos was very impressive, without falling over.
Right.
Was that kind of where the idea came from, that they would sort of stand out, each of the zombies, rather than just being sort of brainless monsters?
It was an idea that I brought to the table. I just thought it would be funny if these zombies brought a piece of themselves and their former lives to their zombie characters. I mean, it was something that I think that Romero did, like even in sort of, you look at Dawn of the Dead and you would see these zombies that you still felt the echoes of their past lives. And I just wanted to kind of take that a step further, albeit in a more comedic direction. But that film was something that I was brought onto that film, and it was originally scripted as a sort of kids movie.
Really? Okay.
and there was a really cool, one of the earlier versions of the film was really cool in the sense that it was going to be almost like Monster Squad-ish.
Yeah.
But it still had an enormous amount of violence in it, and even gore. And I think everybody kind of looked at it and said, there's no way we're A, going to really pull this off, and B, they can't sell it to kids. And so I kind of came into it and said, listen, I think we should age the Scouts up. Like they're kind of on their way out of, being Boy Scouts. And that was part of the whole sort of dynamic of these three kids, was that, two of them were like, they wanted to get out. And one of them was like sort of this, staunch Boy Scout. And then I made it R. Like I said, let's just go for it. Let's make it really violent and over the top. And in a weird way, it was an homage to a lot of like weird B movies from the 80s that I grew up watching. And so even there were like elements of like Porky's, which is a ridiculous misogynistic movie. But there was a certain kind of energy and a certain style that I was kind of going after with Scouts. It was a shame. The movie kind of just I think we were on the zombie train caboose, if I'm being honest. I think people were zombied out, and there were some other factors, I think, that kind of kept us from really finding a big audience ultimately. But I think it's a fun movie. I'm proud of it.
I must say to you, I love the music and your use of it in the film, from the opening sequence to Dolly Parton's 9 to 5, Crank That by Soulja Boy, and Hit Me Baby One More Time. Was that scripted? Did you have to find out if you could get the rights to those songs?
I begged for a couple of the songs. Obviously 9 to 5 and the Britney song were songs that I had scripted and begged for, and it gobbled up a majority of our music budget. And then Black Widow, which was the opening song, I was told I couldn't use it because it was too expensive. And so I sort of very sneakily and slightly irresponsibly had our actor sing the lyrics out loud when we were shooting, because then they didn't have any choice but to buy the song. But I thought it was, I was trying to, get the opening sequence to click and to work, because we had actually had a different opening. We had shot something completely different the first go round, which was much more like a scary opening, but it didn't really set the table properly in terms of the tone of the film.
There's a scene where Carter gets attacked by Miss Fielder, I think her name is, the neighbor, when she's turned into a zombie. Leachman. Right. And I was expecting him to turn into a zombie at the end, and it wasn't until I rewatched it. Did her teeth fall out?
Her teeth fell out, so she was gumming. She couldn't she actually couldn't bite him anymore because her teeth got knocked out. And that's what was the whole sort of funny part of the movie, is that like he's about to get turned, but her teeth are gone, and now she's just gumming. She's biting his bare ass. But
exactly, which I've never seen in a zombie film as well, which I think is great. And maybe that's a way forward, rather than taking their heads off, just take them to the dentist.
Yeah, exactly. Just pull their teeth out. You're fine.
There's a reference in the film to someone says "wow wow wee wow" at one point when one of the zombies dies. Have you seen the Borat sequel yet?
I have not. Funny enough, literally last night, my husband and I tried to watch it, and I think Amazon was like, the system was overloaded. I think that everybody was trying to watch it last night, and so it kept buffering, and so we finally gave up. But we're going to give it a shot again tonight.
You should. I can't explain it. It's just
everyone. I mean, I was laughing out loud in just the first 10 minutes that we were watching it, and I'm a huge Sacha Baron Cohen fan. I think most people are, but the guy is a genius, so I'm excited to watch it.
Waited long enough. I need to talk to you about not only one of my favorite films of yours, but one of my favorite just horror films in general, Happy Death Day. I loved. I've watched it so many times since it was first released. What were your favorite scenes to film in that movie?
Favorite scenes to film in Happy, there was Olive Tree's wake ups in Carter's dorm room. I think those were a favorite because we were in this very we were on a sound stage, and it was this very insulated kind of environment, and there was a lot going on at the time. The last presidential election had just gone down, and so I think there was a lot going on inside people's heads at the time, and so that was a lot of fun to do. All the deaths were fun to shoot, the car explosion on the highway and the bell tower stuff, and all those things were, I have to be honest, like, I don't know if I have a favorite though, just because I had such an amazing cast and such a great crew that, it really was like every day was fun. There were hard days, but they were all fun days. And I think that that's kind of what shows in the movie. There's like there's a real sort of sense of love, kind of this energy that's in that movie.
Yeah, I completely agree. And so obviously there's a lot of scenes that we see play out in different ways every time the time resets. I'd love to know a bit about how you sort of plan that. Did you, for every iteration of that scene, did you film all of those on the same day rather than filming it the first time, then going off and doing other stuff and then coming back and doing it a different way?
Yeah, we had to shoot everything at that whatever location that we were at. So we would have to cover all the stuff that we were doing. To some degree, we employed this thing called block shooting, where you just sort of like keep the camera in one place and then you kind of run through the different scenes. But we actually did very, very little of that, because in the end, because I wanted to create a distinction between each day, my DP on that movie, Toby Oliver, like we talked a lot about making subtle adjustments in the beginning, like just lighting tweaks. And then as the days go on, the way that we operated the camera changed. And so where things started out really smooth and steady, we eventually sort of devolved into stuff that was really handheld and kind of jarring, because we wanted each day to really reflect what Tree was experiencing, sort of emotional state of being. And so that's how we use the camera to really reflect that.
How sort of soon into working on the script and stuff in pre-production did you decide that the killer would wear a baby mask? So I understand it was developed by Tony Gardner, who made the Ghostface mask in Scream.
Yeah. It was late in the game. We
Right.
had been kicking the can on a mask forever because the script had been around for a long time. And I think there were different iterations. There was like a cougar and there was like a Greek god kind of thing at one point. And then once we got into pre-production, I finally faced the music and realized I had to start figuring that out. And I started with a pig. So Tony created a pig and a baby.
Right.
Because I was drawn to both of those. The pig, I think, because I thought it was like something that kind of reflected Tree's selfishness. And I also thought it could conceivably be a mascot. And the baby really, because at the time I was pregnant, we were pregnant with our first child. And so I think I just had baby fear on the brain. And so we kind of went in those two directions, but ultimately I felt like the baby mask was more iconic.
Absolutely. And there's nothing more menacing than a massive 7-foot baby wielding a knife running down a corridor.
Yeah, creepy babies, come on.
Yeah. Is it more challenging writing a time loop movie? Because normally when there's a linear narrative, whatever you present to the audience, they kind of forget it a bit and move on to the next scene. But when you're concentrating so heavily on a particular scene, they get to know it a bit more. So you have to be, I guess, more careful with what you're doing.
I mean, you have to be more careful for sure. And I think what I was most concerned about was repetitive tedium.
Right.
Like, because that's something that I think can work against you quickly. But it was fun too. Like I loved it because there were so many opportunities to play with expectation and to subvert expectation. And even more so in the sequel, that whole movie was built to subvert. And it was really a sort of almost a parody of sequels.
Right.
And so, there was just a lot of it. I just found so much enjoyment and paying things off. There's a classic thing in the first film where you hear when Tree wakes up, every time she wakes up, you can hear through the wall somebody playing a horn. And then you hear the roommate shouting, "Shut up!" And so in the sequel, I showed it. That was the first thing that we see when Ryan is walking down the hallway, is this kid sitting out there practicing his horn, and then his roommate screaming at him. And so that was the fun of the time loop thing, was being able to establish something and then pay it off, and not only in one movie but in two.
And every time Tree wakes up in the time loop, she has only actual memory of what happened last time she died, but also her body sort of has scars and memories of it too, and she sort of feels it every time she wakes up. I wondered if she somehow managed to survive that day and didn't get killed and didn't commit suicide, and she just went to bed normally, what would happen? Would it still reset?
Repeat the question?
Sure. So the day resets every time she dies, right?
Yes, of
and
course.
That's because either she's been murdered or because she's killed herself.
Yes.
But if neither of those two things happened,
she wasn't murdered or killed.
Right. So would it still reset, or would it go to the next day?
That's a really good question that I never really stopped to think about. I think, I would have to assume that the day does reset at some point. Yeah, because she's in a time loop. As time loop rules go, yes, it wouldn't matter. But it was just a lot more fun having her die.
It's very true. Otherwise, it would just be a romantic comedy.
Yeah, true.
Yeah. So how far into the production of Happy Death Day did you sort of think there could be a sequel, or did you not start thinking about that until it was out and it was in theaters?
I came up with the idea for the second film when I was in post-production, when I was editing. And it was another one of those random, I laughed because we were cutting a scene where, one of the scenes where Ryan walks into Carter's room and interrupts, And I just thought it'd be so funny if he was the person who caused this. And then a lot of things started to kind of layer and crystallize in my brain, where it was sort of like, oh, there's all these rolling blackouts on campus. What if this device that Ryan created was the cause of those blackouts? What if, so it was kind of like a snowballing effect. And I ended up just I wrote the movie very quickly. And I wasn't even sure that they were going to let me make it, because I wasn't sure if the movie was going to work or not, the first one. But I did it. I wrote it because I really had to.
Yeah.
It was just one of those ideas I needed to get out of my brain, so I wrote it.
I'm very glad that you did.
Thanks.
And then so the sequel, Happy Death Day to You, is so much fun, and it's not only a sequel, it takes the franchise in new directions. There's parallel universes and talk of quantum mechanics. It's more sort of sci-fi theme as well. Were you sort of worried about taking the franchise in a different direction, or were you confident in?
I wasn't, because for me, you have to understand too, like, it wasn't a franchise to me. Like, I was, I just looked at it as like, oh, this is a really fun, unusual direction for a sequel. What I hate more than anything are lazy sequels that just repeat what the first movie did. And that was the joke of the first 15 minutes of Happy Death Day 2, which was, this is what the traditional sequel would look like. Another person trapped in a time loop, getting murdered, has to solve their own murder, right? And so that was the fun of the movie, was like, I'm going to mislead the audience down this expected path, and then I'm going to flip it. And then we're going to go in a completely different direction, and also shift tones. Like, I changed tones and genre and everything. And some people, were pissed. And I think a lot of people appreciated it, and for what we tried to do. And honestly, if we ever do a third movie, it changes again. Like the idea that I have for the third movie is not like the second movie, and it's not like the first movie. And for me, that's the fun of it, is getting to sort of push those boundaries and sort of test how far you can go within the confines of a franchise. But honestly, I think my guiding principle, especially now at this point in my career, is I just want to make movies that I would like to watch in a theater. Like, I put myself in my own movie theater, and that's what I do. That's the only place that I can really write from and create from at this point.
I'm kind of the same. I mean, with my show, I have to talk to people that I love their work, and I'm interested in what they've got to say and all that kind of thing. And ultimately, you have to make something that, if you don't enjoy it, there's no point doing it in the first place, because you're not going to enjoy working on it. But then you hope that people will gravitate to the same sort of things you do. And I certainly have with your stuff. And on the first film, to me, it was a franchise, and I need to see 100 of them. No pressure.
All right, well, we'll see.
Yeah, and so, of course, it's set on the same day. What kind of challenges did that bring to you? Because obviously the cast is the same, but then did you get the same background actors and actresses? Did you have the same costumes and rebuild sets?
That was a huge challenge. It was a huge challenge, because we had to get everybody back, including background. We had to hope that they looked the same. Yeah, so there was an enormous amount of energy going into recreating the first film. Some of our locations didn't exist anymore. There was that hospital that we shot in the first movie, which by the time we came around to the second movie, it had been gutted. They were going to demolish that hospital. And so we had to go in there and rebuild the interior of the hospital.
Oh, really? Wow.
And then I even had to reuse footage from the first movie in the second movie and seamlessly integrate them, which, by the way, is super cool, because people usually cannot figure out what the old stuff is and what the new stuff is.
Yeah. I had no idea that you did that, so you did it very well.
Yeah, so that was a huge challenge. But again, it was a challenge that everybody was really up for, because we all really believed in the script, and especially Jessica, who I would do whatever she wants. She's just the best actor and one of the best human beings on the planet. And so we were just so delighted to have an opportunity to make a sequel together.
And I love too the dynamic with all of the characters, such as Laurie, changes as well, because of course it's a parallel universe, so people haven't lived the exact same lives, but also Tree gets to see her mum again, who in
Yeah.
the original films passed away, and that I've lost both parents now, but it really sort of resonated with me, and I guess it must have for audience as well that have lost someone that they care about.
Yeah, absolutely. I wrote the sequel in the wake of losing my mother. And my mom had passed away about 2 years before. So that was still very, that was still a fresh wound.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so it was a way for me to work that stuff out. And it was really personal to Jess too, because her parents are still alive, by the way. But she has she's an incredibly close relationship with her mom, and so I think she really felt a lot of things when we were making the film. But yeah, I wanted, the first movie was about a very selfish person coming to terms with who they are, and realizing that they have to change, and realizing that how they treat other people matters. And so that was kind of like that was the sort of core of that film and the emotional core of the film. And then the second one was about, it was a lesson. It was sort of a meditation on grief and how that kind of pain and loss is part of your DNA. It's sort of, it makes you who you are. And so you can't disown it and you can't escape it and run away from it. And so it's funny, a lot of people, when they saw the movie, and it was funny, it was people really who haven't experienced great loss.
Yeah.
That was the common denominator I found. People who would say like, well, why didn't she just stay? Like, she could have broken up that relationship, and she could have kept her mom and Carter if she were smart. And then I kind of felt like, well, then those are the people who kind of missed the whole point of the movie. And it's what Carter actually tells her, is that you don't get to cherry pick your life. You don't get to choose your pain, and what happens to you. And then it's not real. And so that was the whole kind of meaning of the film ultimately.
Yeah, because by going to that universe, obviously the one that was there wasn't there, and the experiences that she had with her mum were different, and they had a different history with each other. And
yeah,
so
I mean, that was there's a scene in the car where she's, and other scenes too in the film, where she's watching old videos on her phone and realizing like they're not her memories.
Yeah.
She was literally living a life that didn't belong to her. And so it wasn't real. It was like a make-believe, like a fantasy.
Can you tell me your favorite Easter egg or callback from the sequel?
Oh God. I think my favorite one that I put in the film was, and it was, I got it in just in the nick of time, but in the first movie, when the Universal logo begins, you know how I did this thing where it repeats, and it was obviously a joke and a play on the idea of a time loop. But if you go back, the sound that it's making when it resets is actually the exact same sound that Sissy makes when she activates. And so it's the identical sound. And so it was a really cool thing that I was able to figure out at the last second before I finished the first film, that I could connect those two things together. So that's probably one of my favorite Easter eggs.
I love it. There's loads of stuff in the background too, and movie posters and just references to other movies. I love all that.
Oh God, yeah. And we flipped things too. Like in the second film, if you look at Carter's dorm room and if you look at Tree's shirt, there are different things on the shirt and different things on the posters. And there's a really, really, I think, potentially illegal Easter egg. This is probably the coolest Easter egg. There's a Back to the Future poster on Carter's wall. And if you watch the sequel and you watch it after, when she's in the alternate dimension, instead of Michael J. Fox, it says Eric Stoltz.
I love that.
Yeah. So, and for people who aren't Back to the Future nerds, Eric Stoltz was the original actor cast and who had actually shot, I think, half the movie.
Yeah.
Before he was replaced by Michael J. Fox. And so we kept it Eric Stoltz.
I think there's still some scenes in the original film that have got like Eric Stoltz's hand in them or something, because they couldn't recreate them.
Yeah. So anyways, that's another sneaky Easter egg, but yeah.
The second I watched the second film, I needed to see a third film. As you can probably imagine, I think I probably tweeted you about a second after the credits finished, asking about the third film. But
Yeah.
what I understand is there is a title, which is Happy Death Day to Us.
Mm-hmm.
Who is the us?
Who's the us? Us.
Oh.
Us.
So everybody us.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Yeah. So that's all I got.
Oh. And would there be returning characters? Would it be new characters?
Absolutely. Both, a combination, but a lot of the whole cast from both films. And some more.
I appreciate you can't say too much at the moment, but so at the end of the second film, there's a kind of post-credits sequence where everyone's taken to the laboratory, and Danielle is chosen to be someone who's purposely put into a time loop. Would it continue from that?
I can't answer that. They'll kill me if I go into any more, because we still don't know if we're actually going to make this or not. And it comes up like every other week. So I feel like I have to kind of bring the spoiler door down.
We won't tell anybody.
Even though I teased it, yes, at the end. I will say, yes, Danielle is a critical piece to the third movie.
Okay.
And it is connected to that ending, yes.
Are the chances of the movie happening greater than they were a couple of years ago?
I think they are. I think they are because we continue to build an audience. And I think that I think the second movie had a very strong reception in its sort of afterlife. But I don't know. I know that we all want to do it. Everybody that made the film wants to do it. I know Jason Blum wants to do it. But I think it's just sort of figuring out like the how of it all. And, it's up to Universal. It's really their call.
Okay. So I'm going to write them a strongly worded tweet in a minute, and then that should sort all that out.
Do it. That should solve it. We'll be on our way.
I think so.
I'm ready. All right.
Problem solved.
Where have you been?
All right. What was I thinking? And so, can you tell me about your next movie, which is coming out very soon, Freaky? For the uninitiated, what is that film about?
So Freaky is about a shy, very codependent girl in high school who swaps bodies with a serial killer. And it comes out on November 13th. It will be in theaters where theaters are open and where it's safe to hopefully see a movie. And then it will be available on VOD, I believe, 3 weeks after that. So I think it's December 4th, but I'm not 100% sure of that. It's the young teenage girl is played by Catherine Newton, and the serial killer is played by Vince Vaughn. We also have some other wonderful actors. Alan Ruck is in the movie, who's fantastic. Katie Finneran, who's in the movie, she's wonderful. The whole cast is great. And it's a lot of fun, and it's rated R. It's very R. I went back to my R-rated roots, so it's very gory. And yeah, I think if people liked Happy Death Day, then I think they will definitely like this movie. I co-wrote it with a friend of mine, this guy Michael Kennedy. He actually brought the idea to me. And he was going to go out and pitch it, and then I kind of I fell in love with the whole idea of it, and we just started riffing and then wrote the movie really quickly. So it all happened super fast.
And my understanding is he pitched it to you kind of as Freaky Friday the 13th.
Because he had a different title. He said, "Oh, okay, so I have this idea, and right now I'm calling it Killer Body." And then he said, it's sort of like, Freaky Friday the 13th. And that's when I was like, stop. First of all, that's your title. Like, forget Killer Body. Like, Freaky Friday the 13th is all you need. And that was actually our working title for a long time until Disney, said no. And then I came up with Freaky. which I think still sort of captured the spirit of the movie and what we were after. And yeah, for me, it was the fun of the movie is that there have been so many body swap comedies, but I felt like I'd never seen the horror version of that. And so it felt fresh again.
Yeah.
And that's what really drew me to the idea.
Yeah, I've watched the trailer a bunch of times, and it seems like so much fun to me.
Yeah.
The cast is amazing too. I wonder, how do you come up with the kills that you come up with when you're writing the script? Do you sort of think of the location the people are in and then think, how could they die there? Or do you think this would be a fun way to kill somebody? Yeah.
No, pretty much. I mean, I have like a little I keep like a little weird list of like horrible ways to kill people.
I have that too.
For fun and for cathartic reasons.
Sure.
But I do think I tend to start with, what feels germane to the location? Like what would you have there? And how could I use that? And I've always had a weird knack for coming up with unusual deaths. I don't know why. It's just a thing. It's either a gift or a curse. I don't know. But yeah, it's just a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. And there's some very, very unique kills in this movie.
And if you could swap bodies with anybody for a day, who would it be and what would you get up to?
That's a tough one. That is a tough one. Like part of me, like, I jump at, I jump at like Beyonce. Can I just be Queen Bee for one day? Can I be beautiful and talented, and maybe just sort of cruise around on a yacht? But there's so many people. It's a really tough one. Sometimes I think about like, I'd love to be in like my kid's head, and sort of experience what his world is like. He's 3.
So the movie is coming out very soon, and it's coming out in December on demand as well. When did you film the movie? Was it affected by coronavirus at all?
It was affected by it. I finished the movie toward the end of December, shooting the movie. But I had to do most of my post-production during COVID. So it was challenging because I had to figure out how to do a lot of things remotely. So working with my editor and our composer, Bear McCreary, we had to figure out a lot of new things, but we got it done. So I'm really proud of the whole the whole team. It was challenging, but we did it.
And so you've been working with Blumhouse Productions for several years on Paranormal Activity up until now. What's Jason Blum like to work with?
Jason's awesome. He very supportive. He really lets you make the movie that you want to make. He's very hands-off in that way. Right. He trusts the filmmakers that he hires. And so that's what the whole relationship is built on. But you have to do it, on the budget. If you don't do that, you got problems, which happens. It's great. It's great.
Yeah, I love all the movies they're doing at the moment and going in creative directions and supporting, really interesting films and casts and stuff. It's really good.
Yeah, they take chances. I like that about them.
Yeah.
They're risk takers. It's a good thing.
And so you came out publicly in 1999. Do you think the industry's got more inclusive of the LGBT community in recent years?
Absolutely. I really do. And I think a great example of it is actually in Freaky. Because one of the lead characters is a gay kid. He's, out and confident and, but, very himself. And I don't know that a studio would have really supported a character like that, 10 years ago. And nobody blinked this time. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that, people want more representation in films, and studios are really figuring that out. So a lot has changed for sure.
Yeah. Have you kept any props or souvenirs from any of your movies? What happened to the standee of Dolly Parton, for example?
Okay, well, the Dolly Parton, most of the Dolly Parton stuff was on loan from Dolly Parton.
Amazing.
Yeah, like Dolly Parton actually helped us.
Wow.
I wrote her a letter, and it turned out that she was a big fan of my dad's, So thank you, Dad. Because she hooked us up. So we got a lot of stuff from Dolly. We got one of her wigs, and like there's all kinds of stuff in the movie. So I did not get to keep those things. I rarely get to keep props because they like to kind of put them in storage and keep them safe in case you do something later or whatever. So it's rare. I do have from the marked ones. At the end of the movie, there's a very bonkers twist ending that involves like portals and stuff, and there's a weird witchy glass doorknob that was like this, it had like a claw holding it. It was a really weird, cool prop, and so I actually got to keep that, and then I had it installed in my house in one of our doors.
Really?
So that was the keeper. And I've got some other stuff. I have like one of the zombie cats from Scouts. Tony Gardner is the best because he will create like extra things for me. So I have the butcher's mask from Freaky. He actually made a mini version for my son, so my son can be the butcher.
Oh, that's so great.
Yeah, so Tony's the best. So those are the kinds of props that I have, but not a ton of stuff. And also like my husband, I don't think he wants like my horror movie shit all over our house. He wants to forget some of that.
So speaking of which, the US election is coming up. The amazing segue is coming up on the 3rd of November.
I mean, this is the most important election in our history. I believe that. And I think a lot of people believe that. It really feels like we're on the precipice of something terribly bad if we don't make a change and try and sort of come back to our senses, I think, as a country, and start working together as a country. And it goes beyond that, it goes beyond political party for me. I worked with a lot of people on Freaky who are diehard conservatives and Republicans. And one of the things that I love about making movies is that, you have to put your differences aside and you have to make this thing together. And I kind of wish that's what our country was about again. It's just like, I wish we could put our differences aside more and figure out ways to help each other. And I just think that people have become so addicted to hating the other side. And I think a lot of that is an extension of social media. And I think that there are very bad people out there who want that for us, that want us to sort of step on and destroy and crush the things that make our country great. And we've only ever been great when we figured things out together. So I'm really hoping that this election, and I'll be blatantly honest, I hope that the scary orange man goes away, because he's a bad person. And there's nothing anyone could ever say to change that in my mind. And by the way, I've always said this, if the scary orange man were a Democrat, I'd still hate him.
Yeah.
So he's just a bad guy. So I would celebrate and vote for a Republican who gives a shit about other people. So, I just want that again. So let's see what happens. There you
go. So sending lots of luck to America for November 3rd. Build bridges, not walls, as they say.
Oh God, yes, I hope so.
Have you got a fun fact about yourself, a party trick, something that people may not know?
Oh my God, a party trick. Do I have one? I don't think I do. I'm quite boring. I guess I put it all up on screen, whatever I have in me. That's definitely a curveball one. No, I think it really is funny. Like, for all of my eccentricities and sort of like all the weird stuff that I put into my movies, I'm a really basic bitch. I'm real boring. I like to cook. I like to spend time with my kids. I love to watch movies, like I'm just that person. So no, I bite my nails. I still do it. It's not a cool thing. It's a gross thing, but I can't help it. I'm a nervous person. That's all I got for you. So if you ever look at my hands, you'll be disgusted by what my nails look like.
I love that you clarify on Twitter that you bite your own nails and not anybody else's.
Well, you have to be clear about these things. You don't want someone to think that you're going to assault them and chew their nails off. So I want them to know that it's just my own gross nails. Anyways.
And then finally, have you got any messages for people watching the Sarah O'Connell show and your fans around the world?
Please support cool horror movies. Keep doing it. We want to make more of them. And so I hope that we can keep small movies alive in the age of giant, franchises and giant tentpole movies. Always think of the little guy. We're here.
Well, Christopher Landon, thank you so much for your time. I've loved chatting to you today, and I love your movies, and best of luck with Freaky, which is coming out very soon.
Thank you, Sarah. I really appreciate it.
And thank you to everybody watching at home. Be sure to share, subscribe, give this video a big thumbs up, and leave lots of lovely comments. We'll see you all again soon for another episode of the Sarah O'Connell Show. Bye.
Well, thank you for this. This was a lot of fun.